Statistics and probability.
Good morning. Welcome to our class in Statistics and Probability. Today, we will deal with z-test comparing the proportion. Watch and listen to this video lesson. Let us start with activity 1. Given that p is equal to x over n and q is equal to 1 minus p, solve for p and q of the following. 1. X is 40 and n is 55. 2. X is 10 and n is equal to 36. 3. X is 155 and n is 275. 4. In a box with 15 tablets, there are 2 tablets that are defective. 5. In a sample of 800 Filipino adults, 90 were identified having lactose intolerance. Pause this video for a while and answer the activity for 5 minutes.
A few moments later.
Welcome back. Let us now reveal the answers. For number 1, P is 0.73 and Q is 0.27. For number 2, P is 0.28 and Q is 0.72. For number 3, P is 0.56 and Q is 0.44. For number 4, P is 0.13 and Q is 0.87. For number 5, P is 0.11 and Q is 0.89. Did you get it all correct? Very good. Let us now discuss about z-test for single proportion. The single proportion or one sample is used to compare a proportion of values in a sample of data to a hypothesized proportion in the population from which our sample data are drawn. This is the formula for z-test of single proportion, where our hyphenated P is the sample proportion, our P is the population proportion, Q is also a proportion, and N is the sample size. Let us have an example of conducting hypothesis testing involving z-test for single proportion. On the average, 30% of the people afflicted with coronavirus die from it. A new treatment is being tried. Only 24% of the 200 patients die from it. Can we say that the new treatment is effective? Using 0.01 level of significance. So we will have the 6 steps of doing hypothesis testing. Step 1. Our null hypothesis, the proportion of people afflicted with coronavirus and die is 30%. In symbol, P is equal to 0.3. Our null hypothesis, the proportion of people afflicted with coronavirus and die is less than 30%. Or in symbol, P is less than 0.3 and it is directional because of less than. Step 2. Based on the statement, our alpha is 0.01. Step 3. The appropriate test is z-test for one sample case. Step 4. Since our alternative hypothesis is directional and our alpha is 0.01, the critical value is negative 2.326. This means that if the computed z is less than negative 2.326, then the null hypothesis will be rejected and accept the alternative hypothesis. If not, then accept the null hypothesis. Step 5. Computation of our z. This is the formula of our z and our given. Our sample proportion is 0.24. Our population proportion or hypothesis proportion is 0.3. And our Q is 0.7. And N is 200. By substituting the given to the formula, our z is equal to 0.24 minus 0.3 all over the square root of 0.3 multiplied to 0.7 divided by 200. To simplify, So our numerator becomes negative 0.06 from the difference of 0.24 and 0.3. And then in our denominator, the square root of 0.21, 0.21 comes from the product of 0.3 times 0.7. So we have there the square root of 0.21 all over or over 200. Then our z becomes negative 0.06 over the square root of 0.00105. So the 0.00105 comes from the 0.21 divided by 200. Further, we have here z is equal to negative 0.06 all over the square root of 0.00105 is 0.0324. Using our calculator, our z is negative 1.85. So let's move on to our decision. Since the computed value of z is negative 1.85, which is greater than negative 2.326, the null hypothesis is accepted. Therefore, the proportion of people afflicted with coronavirus and die does not change. This further suggests that the new treatment is not that effective. Let us have the second example. Jessa believes that greater than 60% of her classmates could pass the exam in statistics and probability. She surveys a random sample of 40 students in their class and found out that 33 passed the exam. At 0.05 level of significance, what can Jessa conclude? Step 1. Null hypothesis. The proportion of students that pass the exam is 60%. In symbol, we have P is equal to 0.60. Alternative hypothesis, the proportion of students that pass the exam is greater than 60%. In symbol, P is greater than 0.6. It is directional because of greater than. Step 2. Based on the statement or problem, our alpha is 0.05. Step 3. This is a z-test for one sample case. Step 4. Since our alternative hypothesis is directional and our alpha is 0.04, the critical value is 1.645. This means that if the computed z is greater than 1.645, then the null hypothesis will be rejected and accept the alternative hypothesis. If not, then accept the null hypothesis. Step 5. Computation of z. Given that our sample P is 0.825 and our population or hypothesized P is 0.6, so our Q is 0.4 and N is 40. Substituting into the formula, Z is equal to 0.825 minus 0.6 all over the square root of 0.6 multiplied to 0.4 divided by 40. So 0.825 minus 0.6 is 0.225. And our denominator square root of 0.24 divided by 40. So our 0.24 there, 0.24 comes from the product of 0.6 times 0.4. Next, we have z is equal to 0.225 all over the square root of 0.006. So the 0.006 comes from the quotient of 0.24 and 40. So we have here z is equal to 0.225 all over 0.0775. The 0.0775 is the square root of 0.006. So our z is 2.90. So our decision, since the computed value of z is 2.9, which is greater than 1.645, the null hypothesis is rejected. Therefore, the proportion of students that pass the exam is greater than 60%. This further suggests that Jessa is right. Your time to answer the problem. Conduct a hypothesis testing. You insist that it is greater than 60% of Cebuanos in favor of implementation of curfew of minors. You surveyed 500 residents in Barangay Kabangkalan and 380 of them favor its implementation. At 0.05 level of significance, what can you conclude? Pause this video for a while and answer it for 10 minutes.
A few moments later.
Let us reveal the answers. Step 1. Null hypothesis, the proportion of Cebuanos in favor of implementation of curfew of minors is 60%. In symbols, P is equal to 0.6. Alternative hypothesis, the proportion of Cebuanos in favor of implementation of curfew of minors is greater than 60%. P is greater than 0.6, and it is directional because of greater than. Step 2, based on the problem, our alpha is 0.05. Step 3, our appropriate statistic test is z-test for one sample case. Step 4, the critical value is 1.645. This means that if the computed z is greater than 1.645, then the null hypothesis will be rejected and accept the alternative hypothesis. If not, then accept the null hypothesis. Step 5, computation of z. Given that our sample P is 0.76, our P is 0.6, and Q is 0.4, and N is 500. So substitute the values of the given to the formula. So our z is 0.76 minus 0.6 all over the square root of 0.6 multiplied to 0.4 divided by 500. So our z is equal to 0.16, the difference of 0.76 and 0.6, divided by or all over square root of 0.24, which is the product of 0.6 and 0.4, divided by 500. So our z is equal to 0.16 divided by the square root of 0.0048. So 0.00048 is the quotient of 0.24 and 500. Furthermore, our z is equal to 0.16 divided by the 0.0219, which is the square root of 0.00048. So our z is equal to 7.31. For our decision, since the computed value of z is 7.31, which is greater than 1.645, the null hypothesis is rejected. Therefore, the proportion of Cebuanos in favor of implementation of curfew of minors is greater than 60%. This further suggests that you are right. If you have some suggestions, comments, and queries regarding our topic, just give your thoughts under comment section or directly ask me through Messenger. Thank you, and see you next topic.